There are people who carry their stories on their skin, and then there are people who carry them somewhere much deeper. So deep that no ink could ever reach it. If you've never felt the urge to get a tattoo, it's not because you lack meaning, it might be because you feel too much of it. Not loudly. Not visibly. But quietly, like an ocean that never shows its depth from the surface. And maybe, without realizing it, you've always been this way. You don't reject tattoos because you don't understand expression. You reject them because expression, for you, has never been something that needs to be seen. It's something that needs to be felt. Some people carve their pain into symbols. You learn to turn yours into silence. Not the empty kind, but the kind that listens, the kind that absorbs, the kind that remembers everything. It often begins in places no one talks about. Childhood, for you, may not have been obviously broken. There were no dramatic scenes, no loud chaos that others could point at and say, "That's where it went wrong." Instead, it was something quieter, something more invisible, a subtle emotional distance. A feeling that your inner world was too complex, too layered, to be understood by the people around you. So you adapted. You became someone who processes internally. Someone who observes instead of displays. Someone who feels deeply but reveals selectively. Where others externalize, you internalize. And over time, this creates what psychologists sometimes call an invisible wall. Not built out of fear, but out of refinement. You don't share everything, not because you're hiding, but because not everything deserves to be seen. Your emotions aren't decorations. They're sacred, and that changes how you express yourself. For many people, a tattoo is a way to anchor identity. This is who I am. This is what I've been through. It's a visible declaration, a permanent statement in a world that constantly shifts. But for you, identity has never felt that simple. It evolves, it breathes, it transforms. Locking a moment, a belief, or a version of yourself into permanence can feel almost dishonest. Because you know something others don't always realize. You are not the same person you were yesterday, and you won't be the same tomorrow. So why would you freeze a fragment of yourself when your entire being is in motion? This isn't indecision. It's awareness. A rare kind. You don't resist tattoos because you're afraid of commitment. You resist them because you understand the weight of it too deeply. Where others see art, you see permanence. Where others see beauty, you see responsibility. And that awareness can make you pause. There's also something else, something even quieter. You may have learned, at some point, that visibility comes with risk. That being seen too clearly, too openly, can invite misunderstanding, judgment, or even loss. So you became careful. Not closed. Just intentional. You choose what parts of yourself enter the world. You don't need strangers to read your story from your skin. Because the people who truly matter, they'll feel it without needing to see it. And maybe, deep down, you've always believed that the most important things about you can't be translated into symbols anyway. How do you tattoo resilience? How do you ink the nights you survived quietly, the thoughts you never spoke, the emotions you carried alone? Some experiences don't belong on the surface. They belong in the depths. And you've always been someone who lives there. There's a kind of emotional minimalism in you. Not because your life lacks meaning, but because it holds too much of it to simplify. You don't feel the need to prove your depth. You don't need to show the world that you've felt pain, growth, love, or loss. Because for you, those things aren't accessories. They're foundations. And foundations don't need to be displayed to be real. But this way of being, it comes with its own quiet weight. Because when you carry everything internally, it can sometimes feel like you're walking through life unseen. People may assume you're simple, or reserved, or unaffected. They don't realize how much is happening beneath the surface. They don't see the emotional calculations, the constant self-reflection, the way you replay conversations, analyze feelings, and search for deeper meaning in everything. You are not empty. You are contained, and containment can be misunderstood. In a world that rewards visibility, loud expression, bold declarations, external identity. You've chosen a different path, a quieter one, a deeper one. But also a lonelier one at times. Because when your story isn't written on your skin, it often feels like it's written nowhere at all. And yet, that's not true. It's written in the way you think, in the way you respond, in the way you notice things others overlook, in the way you protect your inner world like it's something sacred, because it is. Still, there's a question that lingers, even if you've never said it out loud. If you don't express yourself outwardly, then where does all of that emotion go? Does it settle? Does it transform? Or does it quietly build over time, like water behind a dam, waiting for a moment to break? Because the truth is, what you've been calling self-control might also be something else entirely. And understanding that differences might change the way you see yourself completely. And understanding that difference might change the way you see yourself completely, because holding everything inside doesn't just make you deep, it can also make you heavy. Not in a way that's obvious to others, but in the quiet moments, when the world slows down and your mind doesn't. You replay things. You rethink things. You revisit emotions long after they've passed, trying to understand them from every possible angle, as if clarity will finally bring you peace. But sometimes, it doesn't. Sometimes, it just makes the feeling linger longer than it needs to. This is the hidden cost of being someone who internalizes everything. Your mind becomes both a sanctuary and a storm. There are days when your depth feels like a gift, when you see beauty in the smallest things, when you understand people without them having to explain themselves, when you feel connected to something larger than yourself. But then there are other days, when that same depth turns inward. And suddenly, you're carrying emotions that were never meant to stay that long. Unspoken words, unreleased pain, unexpressed versions of yourself. It doesn't explode. It accumulates. Slowly, quietly, invisibly, like emotional erosion. And over time, it can create a strange kind of distance between you and the world. Not because you don't care, but because you care in a way that's hard to translate. You might find it difficult to explain what you feel, even to the people closest to you, not because the feelings aren't there, but because they exist in a language that words can't quite capture. So you simplify. You say, "I'm fine." You nod. You move on. And a part of you remains unshared. This is where the shift begins. Because what once protected you can quietly start limiting you. The same internal world that gave you depth can also become a place where things get stuck. Not everything is meant to be carried forever. Not everything needs to stay hidden to remain meaningful. And maybe expression was never meant to be about visibility. Maybe it was always meant to be about release. You don't have to become someone who puts everything on display. You don't have to change your nature, or suddenly start expressing yourself in ways that don't feel like you. But you can create small openings. Small, intentional ways of letting your inner world breathe. It could be writing things you never say out loud, letting your thoughts exist somewhere outside your mind, even if no one else ever reads them. It could be speaking honestly to one person you trust, not perfectly, not completely, but just enough to feel seen. It could be allowing yourself to feel something without immediately analyzing it, without trying to understand it into silence, because not every emotion needs to be solved. Some just need to be experienced. And this is the reframe that changes everything. Your depth was never meant to isolate you. It was meant to connect you, but in a way that feels real. You don't need to prove your story to the world, but you also don't have to carry it alone. There is a middle space, a space where you remain who you are, quiet, thoughtful, observant, but also open enough to let life touch you back. Because the truth is, your story deserves more than just being held inside. Not because it needs to be seen by everyone, but because you deserve to feel it fully, freely, without it becoming a weight. And maybe that's why you never felt the need for a tattoo. Not because you lack meaning, but because your meaning was never something you wanted to fix in place. You are someone who evolves, someone who understands that identity is not a single moment, but a continuous unfolding. And there is something deeply powerful about that, but even evolution needs expression. Even depth needs release. Not all at once, not loudly, but gently, consistently, honestly, so that your inner world doesn't just stay beautiful. It stays alive. And maybe, one day, you'll realize something that was never obvious before. You were never someone who avoided expression. You were someone who was waiting for the right way to express it. A way that feels true. A way that feels safe. A way that doesn't turn your story into something static, but allows it to keep breathing. Because you are not a symbol. You are not a single version of yourself frozen in time. You are something far more rare than that. You are a story that is still being written. And stories like yours, they don't belong on the surface. They belong in the quiet spaces where real transformation happens. So if you've ever felt different for not needing to show your story to the world, understand this. You are not missing something. You are carrying something in a way that only a few people truly understand. And you don't have to change who you are to belong. You just have to learn how to let your inner world move, instead of holding it still. Because healing doesn't come from hiding your depth. It comes from allowing it to flow. And if this felt like it was speaking directly to something inside you, then maybe you've known this all along. You just needed to hear it in words. If this story resonated with you, you are not alone, and there are more quiet truths waiting for you here.